and go into a case with Andy Giraldo. Are we still
Can you
on?
hear me now? Yes.
We can. Excellent,
Hi,
Andy.
everyone.
All right. We've already introduced you, Andy. You sound great. We can see you, so please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for the patience, everyone. I know it's been a long and interesting day. I hope that what I share with you today gives you hope and an idea of everything you can do and everything you can continue to sell to your company to do. I know it's been challenging, but let's take it on. So today I'm going to take you through my journey beyond metrics to see how we can unlock the workforce potential through advanced people analytics. So let's just go a little bit back. Not everyone, is going through the same exactly journey. But why so important? Every time a business leader asks me, why is it so important? Can just AI do it? Can engineers just do it? Well, first of all, we have to understand the evolution. We started from basic matrix to advanced predictive and prescriptive analytics, which I'll go into in a minute. It really does help organizations make data-driven decisions. And data-driven does not mean just having the numbers, but having the right information interpreted to make those decisions. And I think most of this crowd will understand that. It also enables HR teams to proactively address our workforce challenges, and it does enhance employee experience. So why is it important? Because it's going to change our connection basically with our employees, with our business, and ultimately with our client or our end user. Why or what is now what's going to be what's that role of human-centric technology and workforce resilience? And I don't say resilience in a light matter. I do mean resilience in the core meaning of the word, because these AI-driven tools are definitely going to help us enhance employee well-being. And I will give you an example in one of the cases I'm going to present today. It's also going to allow for personalized learning paths. And I'll give you another example of this and how this actually turns into good metrics for any business. And at the end, it will also give us real-time engagement and monitoring for proactive intervention. And I think this is the big step about people analytics is, okay, let's not just stick with this theory, but let's just move forward with action plans and with possibility of interventions. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of people analytics. Well, a lot of you know this, but let's just go through it in case you didn't. So we start with descriptive. Descriptive is basically just telling us or saying what it is. So turnover is basically how people move in and out of a company. Engagement is how happy people are with a company. What are our recruitment metrics? How long we take to secure a position, how long people in average stay, the tenure that people stay in our companies. This used to be the core numbers. And this was a challenge even for some industries or for some style of, let's say, old school HR. And right now, I'll give you this little joke one of my former HR colleagues gave me. And her reason for not wanting to call her area HR but people was that HR sounded more like human remains. And she wanted to focus on people and how people can also be our end user. So that's why we also call people in the companies that I've worked on. So we went from those human remains from very descriptive, just telling us what we found with basic numbers, to diagnostic analytics, identifying those patterns. Why is this moving? Why am I having attrition in the center, in this country, in this area? Or why engagement is dropping after something happened. And a lot of HR professionals, and earlier it was mentioned that, there are behavioral scientists, there are a lot of people that have really gotten into this even before analytics was a whole thing. And that was the diagnostic part. Now, the more fun part, how I call it, is the predictive and the prescriptive part, which is predictive. How can we forecast this trend? So now that we know what's happening, now that we have an idea of why it's happening, then how can we use technology and even our own knowledge to forecast those trends? So predicting flight risks, predicting talent needs, upscaling needs, everything that we need to know basically about our current company. And prescriptive analytics, it's what are those recommendation actions based on data insights, and what are those steps I'm going to take to reduce attrition? I know that most of us who have worked in this industry for a long time have gotten a touch and a sense and a knowledge and experience to be able to do this with very basic tools that we used to have. And that is what I always share with CEOs, that HR usually does know, but we were having a little bit of trouble of showing our business case to our management and how investment could really turn things around. How can we get the ROI for that investment? And basically why it was important to do this at the same time as scaling a product, for example. So what is the first thing I tell organizations if you're getting ready to prepare your business case, if you're getting ready to invest into tools or into a bigger team, or if you're just getting to really get more than your toes wet into everything related to people analytics? Well, aligning analytics with organizational goals is the biggest key for me in this venture, because companies should act as engines of change. And I'm going to deviate a little bit here for a second, which is, if you see the circle, I'm talking about a little bit how the leadership and the culture and the workforce work as a cohesive circle. I'm a doctor, I'm a psychologist, so I love everything related to circle of life and everything, all the metaphors related to biology. But really, we are agents of change. If the company's agent of change, then our analytics, our information, our insights, and our plan will be even better. So how? Well, I give you 3 key steps. The first one is, if we do have an effective leadership that fosters a culture conducive to transformation, then we will have an engaged workforce, higher profitability, higher productivity, higher customer ratings. And this example I give you is based on the data that we have been able to get through both HR analytics and business analytics working at the same time and connecting with each other. Second, using those analytics to enhance our employee experience, which was one of the things I was mentioning earlier. A positive culture actually empowers employees to embrace change and take ownership. So we find a lot of information with analytics, and then we provide ways to change them, but it's actually up to people to do those changes, to stick to the changes, to go through the curve of change that I'm sure you'll know is very similar to the curve of grievance. So how can we really not only inform and say what we need to change, but foster that change within our company culture? Well, this positive culture actually empowers employees to embrace change, take ownership, and belonging, where at least 56% more are more likely to be effective in their jobs, and 75% are more likely to help drive change, which is basically what I want you to take today. It's not just getting the numbers, it's giving the business case, but also telling your organization and having those agents of change that we need to also pair this with a good change management plan. Otherwise, data and information and plans can just stay as plans, and what we need more is that action part. Our third part goes to understanding that connection between our workforce data and business performance, whilst integrating with HR analytics and overall corporate strategy while balancing insights. So this is basically a summary of what I was telling you before. We have to really understand business acumen, and I've met both HR professionals that like to stay away from the business so that they feel there are more people connected and less pushed by business needs, or HR professionals that stay very close to the business side so that they understand what the business is asking for and try to implement it at the same time with the HR strategy. Whatever your road is, it is really key to have a key understanding of how the business performance is going and what are those pain points. And if you have any, if at all, low-hanging fruit that with small initiatives within the people analytics, you can actually start to tackle and start getting, those little wins that will help you build that culture of change and that culture of utilizing those insights and turning that into business results. So I've told you a little bit about the technical background. I'm going to tell you a little bit now about 3 case studies I've done in 3 different types of company And I'll tell you the good, and I'll tell you a little bit about the not so good, the nitty gritty, if you say, about this. And feel free to ask questions at the end, or if you want to interrupt me, feel free to do that too. But hopefully, this will give you, again, if you haven't done so yet, an expectation of what could you really do with everything. So this is a case study based on talent acquisition. And this was for a global tech company that provided services for different types of businesses. The challenge was that this company was having a very high attrition of 48%. Basically, people were not really sticking at all. And this had been increasing for the last 3 years of that company. There were a lot of low-hanging fruit in this case. Of course, everyone in the business know that one of the reasons was that the company was not performing financially well. And once you know that your, let's say, your field of action is going to be reduced because you can do a lot of things, but if your company doesn't show stability, it's going to be very difficult to tackle that. But we did have a goal to have and provide that trust that we were actually getting back on our feet after a big injection of cash, after a big change. So what was the solution? We implemented an AI-driven hiring model to predict candidate success and fit. Why was this important? Even though we had a good talent acquisition team, it was not an expert behavioral acquisition team. And when we were doing this knowledge of this company, it was very easy to know that we needed people that were resilient, that were in it for the long run, that were adventurous and were in it for the highs and the lows. And a lot of this information was very difficult to recruit for without having that behavioral training. So even though we did behavioral training for the recruiters, we needed to do this faster because we were losing people faster than we could recruit them. And there was also a reputational challenge with this, as well as an impact in our clients and, in the end, an impact in our revenue. So we implemented AI-driven hiring through a couple of tools that I'm not here to promote them. I'm just sharing, the tools that we use. We evaluated companies such as HireVue and Eightfold to analyze the candidate potential, to reduce mismatches, and to really be able to get that people that fit the company for that moment. What was the result? We were able to, I think it was 9 months, if I remember correctly, reduce the attrition by 20%. And I believe by now it's been reduced by 23%. So it was a big spike, then a little bit lower, but we're still implementing changes and it helped a lot. And the key takeaways in this example was, using those predictive analytics really helped us power through. The challenge was that it took us a little longer to find the people, but in return, we wouldn't have to change them again. We wouldn't have to replace them in a little while. Second one was enhancing that hiring efficiency with some virtual assessments. I know this has been around for a while, but this company had never heard about virtual assessments, so they were still doing very, let's call it, analog assessments, and this took a lot of time and we lost a lot of candidates. So this was one of those big changes that happened, and at the end we were able to create a better candidate experience because we had a quicker progress, a quicker process in general, and people were having information of how they were doing in every single stage. So with this predictive analytics models, we were really allowing ourselves to get all the information we needed before the person even joined the company. So not saying this is a fix at all, because again, we still have a big attrition number, and in tech, this can go higher, but it definitely did help us tackle one of the biggest challenges I've seen in attrition for a company that was really struggling with it. Now let me take you to our case number 2. This was a case focused on employee well-being and productivity. This was for a fintech unicorn. So fintech, very big, especially very big in Latin America. It's bringing a lot of technology and finance for people in every single place you can imagine. And fintech unicorns usually have the problem that they're growing like a hockey stick, right? That is their main goal. They have to get investment, they have to get quickly their numbers. But the way they get there, they sacrifice a lot. One of those sacrifices is, and the challenge in this case was the decline in engagement and increasing burnout. We had people that were doing many roles, people that were really betting on this company, but were really burning the candle at both ends. And so even though we actually did know what was happening, what we didn't know was how to really identify the pain points that we could attack as a whole and not as an individual. So our implementation here went a little bit different because we started an AI-driven personalized learning plan. So a lot of people were saying, okay, we're doing a lot of roles, but we're really not growing. And how am I going to grow? And of course, this company didn't have yet its fully prepared career journey or career ladder. They had several mixed roles. And a lot of people that had grown in their roles didn't have a lot of coaching. So they were doing good in some aspects, but they lacked in others, like data analysis, like language models, or similar to this. So first of all, those learning plans really helped us identify what were those gaps that we needed to fill. And second, focus more on mental health and wellness, was tracking with predictive interventions who were the people that were actually now having a breaking point in their health, which was a big thing that we wanted to intervene, because we were really worried that people were not in a safe place mentally. And this posed not only a risk for the company itself, but of course a risk to every employee. And luckily the CEOs of this company were really focused on turning around this and really making it a priority. What was the result of this venture? And let me tell you, it was really, really not easy. I mean, it was the disengagement. Once you reach a certain point, as you know, it's very difficult to turn back. But we were able to do a little bit of a change, which was an increase in engagement scores. The increase was around 15%, which doesn't sound like too much, but trust me, the disengagement was real. So the 15% was significant in around 6 months. The reduced perception of burnout was also in around 20%, if I remember correctly. And we started to see again the productivity we were seeing in the beginning. This also came, and I'm not trying to say this is going to solve all our problems again, this also came with changes. We hired more people to leverage off the load. We were also doing a better separation of certain roles, so people didn't have all the their bandwidth occupied with more than one focus. So it was not only this, just to be clear, but this is what helped us, really tackle those cases where we had high potentials, people that were key talents that we didn't want to lose, people in key roles that we really didn't want to move, to be able to come to a safer place. And also for the people that were joining, for us to be able to say, okay, yes, we know we have a reputation of going really fast as a fast growing company, but we're putting these things in line so that everyone can work in a happy and safe environment. So our key takeaways was that proactive well-being strategies were actually more cost-effective than the health initiatives they had done in the past that were just tailored to, they were not tailored at all. They were just given to everyone at the same level without understanding what was the population or the employee persona. Second, that, that role of AI in employee engagement, we had never seen it before. As a one-to-one relation. We just thought as a byproduct, but here we were able to see it one-on-one. And then finally, like I said in the beginning, HR really knows. The HR team knew what was happening, knew the talent, but now we can easily show what we're talking about. Now we can easily show why is it important to have certain actions in certain moments. That's why I like this key so much. Now going to my third and final case, in case we have a little time afterwards, I'll share you a fourth one. But this one was about D&I. And this has been a topic, sensitive topic in the last few years. But this was also very key in the data and analytics world. So this was a consultancy, a digital consultancy company, of course, based as well in technology. And the challenge was that we want to say unconscious bias, but between you guys and I, we know that many times bias in the companies is not that unconscious, but there was a lot of unconscious bias during hiring and promotions in this company. This has been a traditional company that had grown from one person to around 1,500 people, that the CEO hired their C-level to be very much like him and a boys club. So it was a challenging environment, to mention both D&I and to mention, however, when they had external stakeholders coming in, they really wanted to see about pay, which I know it was mentioned earlier, and about how we were hiring for more diversity and for a more global company. This company had the aim to be global, but it wasn't really looking that global at that time. So one of the things that we did in this company, and like I said, we were trying to track and make sure that representation, pay equity, and career progression were happening without major bias. It's always going to be a bias, but without major bias. And so what we did here was to have an AA-based resume screening that we were actually using, very similar to the recruiting and DI dashboards, to connect both information and make sure that people were growing at the same pace that other people in different groups were growing. So here we use that tool to track pay equity, to track career progression, to track if people added education to the resumes, how much should they or would they move if they were able to apply it in their current position. So that implementation really helped map, first of all, the whole company. We were seeing very big gaps between Latin population and European population and Asian population, and we were seeing very big gaps between gender in terms of pay, and we were seeing a little bit of a gap in career progression between, again, Latin mostly employees. So this gave us that rock solid of saying, okay, this is more than just an impression. We actually do have gaps. If we compare people, we put them on a base model, we can score people this way, and the gaps that we have here are different. And of course, by pay equity, and just to be clear, we didn't speak about having the same salary for people in different countries, but the same position in their bands, which is what they should be, understanding that pay and cost of living in every country is different. So what were my key takeaways in this one? The first one is that really analytics gave meaningful D&I change, because a lot of the policies that we were having in D&I were based on what we thought was right, and by we I talk about HR, or what people thought it was right, but not necessarily on what needed to be improved in the company or what was hurting the company. For example, we were losing a lot of the more dedicated talent that in Latin America or in Europe were outperforming the US. However, because we had those gaps, they were really unable to stay and believe that this was their place for them. The second key takeaway for me was that measuring DI success with data really changed the conversation of DI should happen just because it's the way it should happen and it's right for everyone, but in the sense that it actually, again, if you cross-reference it with business outcomes, when this DI indicator is going up, when our, let's say, pay gap is going lower and our income or our revenue is growing, then it means that it's actually connected. And so it just makes it easier and more visible and more transparent for business holders to actually understand that. And what are the final considerations? Understanding what are the things that we're still navigating through. And again, not saying or pretending that we know everything, but just letting you know those things that are challenging still. Privacy and compliance, navigating through GDPR, CCPA, and other regulations is challenging. Doing between states and countries, if you have a global company, is very challenging, especially if you're talking about pay, for example, where it's not only pay, you have to have all other components of salary and those to take into account in analytics, and not every tool has all those global components, so you have to maybe build it inside, and that's a whole other journey. Avoiding algorithmic bias, that also happens, you guys have heard it. So be aware of that. Transparency and trust, communicating that data and how it's used to your employees. What is it that you're using for them for any purpose you're using? What are those best practices? I think that's still something that's coming. I think there's an ethical use, but the line's still blurry depending on how you use it. And well, what are the future considerations that I bring to you now? And is AI-driven HR automation, what are the things that are coming, the blockchain in HR and data security. That is not my expertise, but I've heard so much of that, and I'm really looking forward to understanding how that is going to come about. And the real-time workforce analytics, this is one of the things I'm most excited about, and there are a couple of tools that are already doing this, letting me know who is getting disengaged, who's getting more engaged, and how they can do that and read that by their use of email, their use of Slack, the timing of how they're responding, and a couple of other things. That is one of the things that I think is great. And well, does this mean that companies are going to work without HR? I don't think so. Hope I'm right. HR becomes a strategic partner finally, and we are that evolving role of leaders where we're still pushing towards where should we get this data from, where are these initiatives coming from, and how to upskill for the future. One of the challenges I'm having right now is ensuring that my team is data literate, and what does that mean, and how they can either upskill or reskill to get into a place where they can have these conversations with their stakeholders. And to leave you, with questions in case you have them, how would I come about doing this plan for your company or for your challenge? This is a visionary roadmap for that workforce transformation I was telling you about. I would start by defining that data-driven workforce strategy. And again, business goals is not just the big goals we put up in an email. I think it's understanding the business acumen and the end role. Does my company want to IPO? Does my company want to sell? Does my company want to go global? What is really that goal that we are going to go beyond what we write and what we do to motivate people? To invest in AI and machine learning tools. And I think most of us have been either working for this or doing this, and it's still challenging, but I think it really comes around in the ROI. To integrate analytics into all the areas you can. I mentioned talent acquisition, learning and development, and retention. I think that is where a lot of it really comes down to showing the greatness and the low-hanging fruit that we can do. 4, to foster that culture of continuous learning and agility. I think that as long as we come and we become a team that can learn, can progress, can change, we'll be able to apply this and more things to come in our field. To celebrate success, and I am even telling this for myself, I think that sometimes we just get so stuck in everything that happens and all the roadblocks we have in the way that we don't take a step to celebrate all the wins that we have after doing a big plan like this. And finally, to measure and iterate based on real-time insights. Don't be afraid to iterate, change quickly, to keep an open mind for that. So I hope that you're really, empowering your organization to drive by, transforming your HR from being operational to being fully strategic, to really use technology as an enabler and focus on becoming really fully literate in what technology can bring. And hopefully your company can invest in more tools, invest in your learning, and invest time to do these changes. These changes don't come from one day to another, so you also need patience and time. And hopefully what I've shared with you is relevant and you get motivated on your journey. So thank you so much.
Andy, thank you. Great presentation, really fascinating use cases, and you win the Resilience Award for bearing with the technology challenges that we had. So I'm going to ask us to hold on questions so we can just make up a little bit of time, but another round of applause, please, for Andy. Thank you.